Welcome back to Reading Sisters. It's Naomi. Today we will be reading the book called The Life of Trayvon Martin, Rest in Power, A Parent's Story of Love, Injustice, and the Birth of a Movement by Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. The Enduring Life of Trayvon Martin. I'm going to read the back to you guys. The child we lost was a son, a boy who hadn't yet crossed the final threshold to manhood. His is the story of a life tragical, cut short, but it's also the story of a boy who in death became a symbol, a beacon, and a mirror in which a whole nation came to see its reflection. Our case was not America's first incident of senseless gun violence or its first racial movement motivated killing, but it was the first in a wave that reunited people's passion for the cause of justice. We tell this story in the hope that it will continue the calling of our son left for us to answer. We tell it in the hope for healing, for bridging the divide that separates Americans between races and classes, citizens and the people, and the police. Most of all, we tell it for our son, who has no voice, but those young souls and lively spirit guide us in everything we do. We will never stop saying his name and telling others the story of his life and his death and all that followed. His spirit lives on, and even his death may yet be redeemed. This is the story of our son, Trayvon Benjamin Martin. So if you didn't like that description on the back, I would not recommend continuing in this video, but if you did, you should definitely continue. This cover is bothering me, so I'm just going to quickly take it off. Okay. Rest in Power, The Enduring Life of Trayvon Martin, The Memory and Legacy of Our Fallen Son, Trayvon Martin. We're going to be reading Our Lives Before. I'm just checking something real quick. So, this is the introduction, and we will read the introduction and some of chapter 1. Or chapter 1. Introduction, Sabrina Fulton. For all that is secret will eventually be brought into the open, and everything that is concealed will be brought to the light and made known to all. Luke 8:17. How can I show you the hole in my heart? How do I write about the death of my son? Words can be weak instruments. It's almost impossible to convey the devastation and pain, the bottomless loss, heartbreak, and helplessness, the feeling of being broken into pieces that will never come back together again. Not all the way. One piece of me has gone missing, and it will stay missing forever. There's nothing in its place. The child I lost was a son, a boy who did not yet cross the final threshold to become a man. He had been 17 for only 3 brief weeks, still in the beautiful and jubilant passage through childhood's last stages, still on his way to becoming. Instead, he'll remember for the things he left behind. The bullet that pierced his heart, the blood that stained the ground, the crime scene photographs of his corpse, and the famous hoodie picture, the fight to find an answer to the question of why he died in a place where nobody seems to care, and where even the people whose job it was to care was eager to move on to forget. I can never forget. Nobody ever gets over the death of a child. All I can do is remember, and in remembering, I pay homage to my son, in the hope that the truths I can help others, and that maybe someday, through God's grace, what happened to my son will never happen to another mother's child. His is the story of a life cut tragically short, but it's also the story of a boy who in death became a symbol, a beacon, and a mirror in which a whole nation came to see its reflection. It's the story of a young life that, at its seeming end, was transfigured into something else. The truth is that my son took his last breath, and that will never change. The hole in my heart will never heal. They say when an adult dies, you bury the past. When a child dies, you bury the future. But though his physical life ended, he isn't yet finished leaving his mark on the world. And so I will never stop saying his name and telling others the story of his life and his death and all that followed. His spirit lives on, and even his death may yet be redeemed. This is the story of my son, Trayvon Benjamin Martin. The call comes at the start of a workday. I've just left my desk at the offices of Miami-Dade County's housing agency, a cluster of cubicles in a downtown office building, and retreat to my car where I am now sitting. Miami sunshine flooding in through the windows, but I don't notice the sunlight, and haven't turned the car on. On the other end of my phone is my ex-husband, Tracy Martin. It's the second time he's called me today. He says something about our son. I don't quite understand, which will be soon become clear. The previous night, on Sunday, February 26, 2012, at approximately 7:17, our son Trayvon Martin was shot to death in Sanford, Florida, sprawled out on the wet grass of Florida townhouse complex. A single bullet hole in his 17-year-old heart. The call shuts out the sunlight and the sounds around me. I feel myself falling down a long, dark shaft in silence alone. My name is Sabrina Fulton, and in that moment, one life for me ended and another began. Before that day, before Trayvon's death, chances are I would have lived and died without you ever hearing my name. I am one of the mass of Americans living an anonymous life of infinite complexities in the struggling suburb of the American city. One of the underheld people whose weeks go by in a predictable rhythm of work and school, church and picnics week after week, from cradle to grave. Happily, before that phone call, there have been very few dark days. I've suffered through deaths of older relatives, like most people, and preserved through the tragedy of my brother Ronnie's car accident, which left him a quadriplegic. But I felt that God had always protected me, watched over me. On Sundays found me in church in Apaloca, near our home. Sunday school at 9:30 a.m., church services at 11 o'clock. We believed in the Lord and believed we were blessed. We also saw enough chaos and pain around us to know that life is fragile and happiness isn't guaranteed. But nothing, no blessing or fear prepared me for this. Trayvon's funeral was on March 3rd, 2012, less than a week after I'd received that shattering call from Tracy. I thought that call was the worst moment of my life. I was wrong. The news over the phone, as son's one and only body, a grotesque reversal of the usual order of life and death, was many times worse. I couldn't fully grasp, and then, and can only barely remember now, the details of the terrible day when Trayvon's body was put to rest. I walked through the day in a daze. We had celebrated his birthday on the 28 days before, on February 5th, just a week earlier. I had been thinking about Trayvon's getting his driver's license. I had been thinking about his junior prom. I was thinking about what he was going to do with the rest of his life. Now, instead, we are preparing our son for his eternal rest. We buried him in white suit, powder, blue accents, and white shoes. And we sent him off in a baby blue casket with his name engraved on the side. With his fresh haircut and smooth, unblemished skin, we with it skin. He looked like he was going to his high school prom. The body was placed in a mausoleum drawer in Miami Cemetery, yet I never believed that he was there. From the minute I learned that he had died, I always felt his presence. We buried his shell but his spirit, who Trayvon Martin was and who he always will be, remains. I believe this with all my heart. That was the one thought on my mind from the moment I heard the news of his death. It's what I wanted, wished, and prayed over, and it came true. Trayvon Martin was soon everywhere, in demonstrations, marches, and rallies, from Miami City, where he had lived, to Sanford, Florida, the small town near Orlando where he was killed, to the Million Hoodie March in New York City, to hundreds of newspapers and magazine articles and millions of tweets and Facebook posts, to endless prayers from untold supporters, and soon all the way to the White House. Whenever a child walks in darkness, danger, and fear, and wherever people honor my son's life and protest his death, his presence lives. It is now 4 years since my son's death. In the midst of indescribable devastation, my favorite Bible passage, Proverbs 3:5 and 3:6, always come to guide me, and it reads, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path." After the funeral, in the midst of the trial of the man who shot Trayvon and the tribulations that followed, none of which I would ever fully comprehend, I put my faith in God, and a path was laid before me. We brought the tragedy of Trayvon Martin to the world, using his death as a call for change. We tell Trayvon's story in this book along with our own story of how two ordinary parents from Miami, Florida, became activists in bringing their son's case to the world, in the hope that there won't be any more heartbreaking cases like his anywhere else. Not in Sanford, Florida, where my son was shot dead on February 26, 2012, or in Jacksonville, Florida, where Jordan Davis, 17, was shot dead by a 45-year-old man who objected to the music Jordan and his friends were playing in their car, or Ferguson, Missouri, where Michael Brown, 18, was fatally shot by a police officer, or Cleveland, Ohio, where Tamari Rice, 12, was shot by a police officer as he played with a toy pistol in a park, or Staten Island, New York, where Eric Garney, 43, died after being put in a chokehold by an officer during an arrest for selling single cigarettes from a packet without a tax stamp. The list goes on and on. One tragic case after another for too many years, and with too many victims to count or properly remember. Our case is far from the first incident of senseless gun violence. It was definitely not America's first racial motivated killing, but it was the first in a wave that reunited people's passion for the cause of injustice. I never imagined that my voice would be not only heard, but heard by so many, and that it would become one of a chorus of voices shouting, "I am Trayvon Martin," in support of solitary of our fight to make his death matter and not be forgotten. I could never have imagined that my son would become, in death, a symbol for injustice. We tell his story in the hope that it will continue the calling that Trayvon left for us to answer, and that it might shine a path for others who have lost or will lose children to senseless violence. We tell it in the hope for healing, for bridging the divide that separates America between races and classes, between citizens and police. Most of all, we tell it for Trayvon, whose young soul and lively spirit guide us every day in everything we do. Rest in power. So that was Rest in Power by Sabrina Fulton and what's it called? Tracy Martin. That was the introduction. It was surprisingly long, so I will not be reading the first chapter today. Actually, you know what? There's probably not much, yeah. No, yeah, I won't be reading the first chapter today. But please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to see more and hear more of this book. We post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and sometimes on the weekends. But thank you for watching, and we will see you the next time we post.